Welcome to South Shore Piano, the official podcast of the South Shore Piano School. I'm your host, Jonathan Roberts, and on this podcast we talk with students, parents, teachers, and other leaders to find out exactly how music and the arts are changing lives every day. My guest today is Donna Luther, who has been the head of the Inly School in Scituate, Massachusetts since 1996. The Inly School is a private independent Montessori school and is really leading the way in incorporating creativity and innovation in the classroom, really celebrating students' individualities and guiding them on their education and creative journey. Donna has clearly had an impact on thousands of lives over the years, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Donna.
I'm so happy to be here, Jonathan. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I would love to take it all the way back to the beginning. Your background is in music and the arts, and that clearly plays a huge part in your work today at Inly School. So tell me about young Donna. Take me back all the way to the beginning, how you got started as a kid. I'd love to hear the story.
Thanks so much. It's actually a very long time ago. My parents were professional musicians. They were accordionists in the 40s and early 50s, when the accordion was a very popular instrument, right? And yes. They were professionals. They were national champions for a few years running, as you know, the accordion was a big thing. They were on television a lot, it was as television was burgeoning, so it's really a wonderful childhood. I remember very clearly at a very young age sitting, because they would practice like 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day. And I would color, and listen all the time. And I think the music and the harmonies and the work that they put into it just became part of my DNA. It probably was already, right? And so they had a big, huge accordion school, believe it or not, in Quincy.
Wow.
And, and they would have like a concert group and, really very sophisticated arrangements of classical music and so on. My dad did all the arrangements. And my first performance, I had a little teeny accordion and I was almost 3, 2.5. Yeah. And my dad helped me learn a song and I was going to go on. He did a solo act first, and then I was going to go on and play this little song with him. And I walked on the stage as he was doing his solo act. He did not see me. And it turns out that I was imitating everything he was doing from diagonally behind him, imitating his facial expressions and how he was moving the accordion and so on. And the audience was roaring and he had no idea what was going on. And that was my first time on the stage. And that hasn't stopped.
That is incredible. So did you end up, as you grew up, did accordion end up being your instrument?
Well, it was because, of course, they taught me, and
Sure.
I was the eldest child. So, of course, I had to follow in their footsteps, and I was also a child of the 60s, and the accordion was not cool. So eventually I begged them to have piano lessons. But it was funny because I was probably around 13 or 14 when that started to happen. And I'd had the accordion in my hands for so long. I remember going to my first lesson and dropping my head down to orient myself on the keys like you do in the accordion. And
that's amazing.
Teacher really struggled with me to get me to sit up and but the orientation was so different, So in the accordion, you only use 2 fingers in your left hand. And I still when I play the piano, I play with all of my 5 fingers on the right and 2 fingers on my left hand. So it's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like not enough people play the accordion anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it's been fun to see it kind of come back. My mother's 90 now, and she's enjoying hearing and seeing, folks start to take it on again, which has been really quite lovely for her. But, sort of all along the way, I loved music. And I was always that kid that wanted to be a teacher. So whoever was my favorite teacher, if my favorite teacher was a math teacher, I was going to be a math teacher. My favorite, I had, I forget, there was one librarian that I just adored. So I was going to be a school librarian, but I knew I was going to work in a school. And then I got to high school, and my music teacher was just extraordinary. And that was the moment that I knew that that's what I was going to do with my life, was just to teach in the arts. And, so musical theater was my thing, essentially. And I learned music and theater, and, just went from there.
That's so awesome. What was it about that music teacher that you remember that really sort of struck a chord with you to say, okay, I'm going to go into the arts with education?
Yeah, she had a really wonderful way of meeting people where they are and moving them forward. It wasn't a heavy-handed kind of thing. It was much more invitational, and
Yeah.
I felt invited into the space, and felt like I could accomplish what I could and improve. And she just sort of welcomed that in I think ways that spoke to me.
Wonderful. And it sounds like that approach ties in a lot with your work that you do now with the Inly School.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I've learned over time is that my work in the arts for years, I acted, I sang, I danced, I choreographed, I painted sets, I did all of those things. And I think what I found was the commonality of it really is creative thinking, that out of the box, pushing limits, pushing the envelope to say, what's the new thing I can create? And I think it's structure that leads to freedom. And I
Yes.
think my work at Montessori I think that's why Montessori education has resonated with me, because I really think there's a very strong foundational structure, but it leads to freedom, but freedom of gaining perspectives to create my own opinion about something, and to ask good questions, and be curious, and to not follow a linear path, but to find pathways that get you to that discovery of who am I, and that discovery of who am I in the world, and what kind of work can I do in the world, and what do I want to be and do in the world,
Yes.
and I think it's, again, very invitational.
Yeah, absolutely. I love every bit of it. Now, as you were finishing high school and you knew you were going to go on the education path, did you know that you were going to end up going the Montessori route at that point?
Not a clue. As a matter of fact, I think when I was in school, Montessori was just maybe a footnote
Ah,
in our college textbooks. There are some alternative forms of education, whether it's Reggio Emilia or the Waldorf school systems and so on, and they're really sort of put on the side, which I think is tragic. I think that there should be more of what we're doing. I think multi-age classrooms, for example, are a real benefit to children.
yes.
When you put kids developmentally together, so first, second, and third graders are together in our school, and
Mhm.
fourth, fifth, and sixth graders are together. And what it means is that children develop. I say to parents all the time, it's not like your child, if you have more than one child, they didn't all learn to walk at 12 months, 4 days old, right? They learn to
Right.
walk within a range of time. And it really is the same with reading. And it really is the same with writing. And it really is the same with moving from that concrete learning to abstraction. And when you say it's a range of time, kids aren't sort of elbowing each other out saying, I'm smarter than you are. Because when something is presented just in October of second grade and you're not quite ready for it, I think kids lose their confidence, they lose their self-esteem, but
Sure.
we present it in a range of time. So within that range, they can feel confident and competent and feel like they're learning and progressing. And, maybe they're ready in November. Who cares? It's like they just need to get there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey from the sort of traditional education model and how you found your way to Inly. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
started college presumably to be sort of to go on the traditional route. I'd love to hear how that trajectory sort of changed for you.
Sure, sure. So I taught in traditional independence. At first, I taught in public school, but then in traditional independent schools for a long time, but always in the arts. And so I was always in that structure that leads to freedom kind of space, and observed that. I thought that could apply to other departments.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that schools are so often siloed as opposed to integrated and connected and so on. So I just thought it would be really interesting to, after that experience, which was over 20 years, that I would then say, how do I take this and find, I was interested in leadership. So find a small school that I could head. I had no idea about Montessori really, other than it existed. And within a period of a couple of months, 3 different people told me about the job at this school. And to
Oh,
each of them, I said, I don't know anything about Montessori, but thanks for asking. And then by the third one, I said, well, maybe that's probably a message for me, right? And I applied. I was actually surprised that they invited me to come and interview. And I remember going home saying to my husband, I have to have that job. There is something about that school that really resonates with my philosophy of education. And I didn't put my finger on it for a while. It really took me a while to actually articulate that structure and freedom, understanding that I've been speaking about today. But it was really powerful for me.
yeah, that's so interesting. So it sounds like you came into it not thinking, okay, I'm going to be a Montessori teacher, but the philosophies just sort of clicked with what you
Right.
were already thinking with your arts background. Do I have
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, exactly. So it has been a pleasure and a real journey here over the years to sort of articulate that, for parents who are coming into the school, because I don't think we had it articulated well when I got here. So it's been fun to think about how to work with teachers and work with the philosophy and say, this is who we are, and not be quiet about it, but be proud about it.
Absolutely. So for folks who are listening who either haven't or hearing the word Montessori for the first time, or it's a little fuzzy, I think you've hit on a lot of it, but I
Yeah,
feel like the sort of definition gets sort of fuzzy a little bit. So
sure.
if you had to sum it down, I know
Yeah,
like
sure.
entire books and curriculum are based on this concept, but if you had to sort of water it down to sort of its essence, especially how you guys do it at Inly, what is Montessori education?
Yeah. So Montessori education is actually, it's a deep belief in children. It's a deep belief that children are naturally curious and naturally want to learn and progress. And it's our job as educators to create an environment where they can explore and discover and make meaning. So it really is, our teachers are certainly teachers, but they're also guides.
Yes.
Um, our children are teachers within the classroom because we have a 3-year rotating cycle. A child is in a classroom with 2 teachers for 3 years. And by the time they're in their 3rd year, they're actually the teachers of the younger children. So it's just not, you don't always just look to the adult. You look
Right.
at your peers to say, oh, that I can learn from that person. And the environment is actually the third teacher, right? The really purposeful environment that is set up to engage and to help children discover.
I love it. I'm going to write that down. I love that. So it sounds like, sort of typical school day, kids have their sort of primary teacher, and it's not only sort of learning things, but also it sounds like there's sort of a group element to it where there's a lot of interaction between the students.
Sure, absolutely. And again, it's the setup in the classroom. There are some activities in the classroom that are certainly group lessons with the whole class. There are some that you actually have to negotiate and find a partner to do the work with you. All of our students have independent time during the day because we deeply believe that they should build a capacity for independence and responsibility. So, wait, I'm responsible for doing this, but maybe I, sort of didn't choose the right thing today. So the teacher will help guide them to saying, huh, what's your role in this, and how do you take responsibility? What we find over time is that our kids, when they go off to different high schools, are not only very well prepared, they're very well prepared with time management and self-motivation, and it's all driven by a love of learning, because we're approaching it in a way that is not sort of top-down management, but it is honoring the learner within.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way you describe the teacher as the guide. Because I feel like folks who have no idea what Montessori is, I think there is a misconception sometimes that it's just sort of a free for all, which is certainly not the case at all.
Certainly not, right?
But I love how you describe the teacher as the guide and the freedom within structure. So much really good stuff. I'm curious, have you ever had a student come in who's coming in sort of from the traditional education system, where it's basically you're sort of being delivered the information and you have to sort of bring it back up, and then there's not as much interaction. I'm just curious, have you ever had any students come in from that? Because I imagine it's kind of like entering an alien world coming in from that.
Absolutely. And I think when students relax within it and we help them do so, and I think one of the things we actually try to really teach in those moments are risk taking, because our kids take a lot of risks. They're not afraid to speak up. They're not afraid to make a mistake. And I think that's a culture that's unlike others.
Yes.
So one of the things we do is say, take a risk, fail fast, and let's learn from that and move on to the next risk we're going to take together. So let's write a new essay, or let's read a book that we didn't think was in the genre that we wanted to read, and find the things that we might appreciate and take forward. And once we just break through that barrier, kids feel at home here, I think.
That's so wonderful. And I love this idea of risk taking, because we're in sort of this age where people are afraid to raise their hand because they might get the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Or stuff like that. And in the performing arts, of course, we're taking risks all the time. Every time we go out. That's one of the things I love about it, though, because again, it's one of those things that translates into other aspects of kids' lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know now that kids that graduate from college today will have 12 significant jobs in their lives, not
Wow.
2 or 3 or 4, like some people in their whole career, in 5 different careers. It's
Wow.
12 jobs in 5 careers, and 4 of the 5 careers don't exist yet. So if I frankly think, as educators, if we believe in a linear approach and that you teach this, and this, and everything's going to work out okay, we're taking the wrong path for kids. I think it's our job to teach them to follow curiosity. It's our job to teach them about iteration and coming up with 100 ideas for something, and maybe 100 ideas on one side and 100 ideas on the other, and finding 2 very disconnected things and seeing where they can connect, because that's going to create the new career that doesn't exist yet. So if we don't teach kids to think in those not only imaginative but problem-solving ways, and give them that kind of process to have in their back pocket all the time, I don't think we've done our jobs as educators.
I agree completely. And it's so funny the way you describe some of those careers don't exist yet. So we might have like the founder of the next Google or, or something at your school.
Which was actually a Montessori kid. Amazon, right. Google, those are Montessori kids, So I think that speaks to something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, I'm totally ignorant of this, but does Montessori, does that go through high school, or is that just like once you go to the high school years, there are kind of on your own?
20 Montessori high schools in the country. So, it's a pyramid system, right? There are probably, proportionately, there are probably 2,000 preschools to 200 elementary, middle schools to 20 high schools. And because Montessori did most of her work in preschool.
Sure.
Her son carried the work on, but less so in elementary school. And together they wrote a 3-page paper on what a middle school might look like. So I think it actually sort of parallels their work, right?
Yes.
But very dedicated Montessorians are saying, here's how we can apply this in best practice and take this on in other levels of education.
Cool. I've always been so curious about that. And then, so do you sort of like prepare the students for launch as they're as they're finishing their time at Montessori for the quote unquote like normal high school years?
Yeah, very, very much so. And we really, because we've known them, most of them since they were toddlers. So we've
Yeah.
seen them grow up. We actually know what kind of learners they are, and they know what kind of learners they are. They actually know and can articulate, this is what I need in a school. And so we help them make a list. And then they go and look and then, apply and so on. So it really is a partnership in that discovery.
Yeah, that's so wonderful, the discovery process.
Yeah.
Now, you've been at Inly since 1996. Tell me how it sort of evolved in your time there and how your creative background has sort of weaved its way into that.
Yeah, thank you. So when I got here, we had 140 students on 3 acres, and now we have 280 students on
Wow.
10 acres. So we bought up property, we added buildings, we redesigned things, and so on. And so we've just grown. And I think that that's a tribute to what I said earlier, which was articulating what Montessori is and helping parents understand that.
Right.
And I've also seen parents over time really just more open to saying, why do I have to send my child to a traditional school? I'm not sure it did everything it could have for me. And so what alternatives might I look at?
Gotcha. And then, how have things been since we're about 14 months in now to this COVID business, hopefully seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But how has that journey been for the Inly Montessori experience?
Yeah. So, I'm so proud of our teachers. Essentially, we've always had 2 teachers in a classroom with 24 students. So we have a luxury of space. And so we just repurposed some of our spaces into cohort classrooms. We also made
Okay.
a full outdoor classroom program over last summer and so on. So we've been able to be in business since September with all of our students every day. Like everyone, we had to send a cohort home after Thanksgiving and a cohort home after the December break.
Sure.
But essentially, we've been here. And I think that's a real tribute to our health and safety committee and also our teachers who have been here every single day doing the work.
Phenomenal. Love it. Now you see hundreds of students every day, thousands of students over the years. So I'm sure you have many, many stories, but I'm just curious if any of them stick out. I know I'm putting you on the spot at this moment, but any who have sort of come in, whether as a fresh student or from the sort of traditional model, that clearly this was what they needed to sort of meet them where they are, as we were talking about earlier. Are there any particular sort of inspiring stories that come to mind?
Sure. Well, millions.
Right. It's
It's hard
hard
to
to pick the
sort
right.
out actually. But yes, I think we find that students that come to us, one in particular, was just a very, very shy girl. Um, and she in first grade made a meeting to come to my office and said that she knew that we have a holiday performance in December, and then all of our classes do plays. And she said she was just way too nervous and couldn't possibly do it, so she was going to skip being in the play. And I said, it's one of the things that we do because we want to prepare you for what we think is going to be your lifetime and opportunities in your life. And I understand you're nervous. And here's something that I do. If when I was younger and if I was nervous, I took a big eraser and I would just take it on the stage with me and squeeze it. Anytime my stomach butterflies started to happen. And so, we coached her, and I said the same thing to her before she went on stage in the December holiday performance. And then again, so we just had little conversations along the way. And by the time we were going into 8th grade, and I still direct the middle school musicals. So the 7th and 8th grade shows I direct. And by the time we were going into 8th grade, she was going in, she made another meeting come in to talk with me and said, so Donna, what do I need to work on over the summer so that I could have a lead in the musical next year? And I reminded her of the meeting that we had had 7 years earlier, where she was so nervous. And she said, and I'm so happy that you helped me find my voice. And she said, I'm not shy. And I said to her, I know that 99% of our students won't go into theater or music.
Sure.
It's a small percentage, but 100% of you will be presenting yourselves in person, whether it's at a job interview, whether it's when you're in a job and you have to make a presentation about some things you've thought about and how you want to talk to others in your department. And we want you to have a voice in that. And so she's remained in touch with me, as has her parents, over the years, to keep me in touch with her career, which is going really well.
That's so inspirational. I love so much about that. I'm just curious, what career is she on right now?
She's in the tech world. So,
Oh, of course.
yeah.
And
But I'm a manager in the tech world now, in her
yes.
30s. So she's doing very well. Yeah.
And what I love about what you said is this idea that we're presenting ourselves. I think especially with music and the performing arts, there's this sort of notion that it's this sort of fluff activity or it's not as important, but we actually have to do this all the time. If the job interviewer just getting the right answers, then either they'd hire the cheapest person or it would be impossible to hire anybody.
Right. Absolutely.
For sure. Well, Donna, this has been such a wonderful conversation to get to know you a bit about Montessori, about the Inly School, and the truly life-changing work that you're doing every day that you've been doing for decades. So inspirational. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And, I'm so impressed with your work, too, because you're really bringing the work of the arts and education out into the world. So congratulations on that, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna.
Take care.
Thank you so much to all of our listeners. Again, this is South Shore Piano, the official podcast of the South Shore Piano School, where we talk with students, parents, teachers, and other leaders like Donna about exactly how music education and the arts are changing lives every day. If you enjoyed this, do hit the subscribe button on the podcasting app of your choice, or if you're checking out the YouTube version, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you're among the first to find out about new episodes as they're released. We publish new episodes every Monday and Friday. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.